Hello everyone, welcome to the March Inspire Online Book Club. My name's Ian and I'm joined by Chris, Claire and Terri. And today we're discussing The Lamplighters by Emma Stonex. This is a novel very much set by the sea and quite a lot on a lighthouse. This is going back to a time when lighthouses had to be manned, and a crew of 3 on this particular lighthouse would have to spend several months stuck out there, with rattling around with just themselves for company, which is obviously a recipe for things to go badly wrong. It's actually based on a true event. I think it was the Ellen Moore lighthouse in the Outer Hebrides, where in 1903 the 3 keepers mysteriously went missing, and I don't think they ever found out quite why. Emma's taken this idea but created a completely fictional cast of characters on a lamp called the Maiden off Cornwall, which I think is completely fictional as well. We've got a cast of characters here where 3 married couples, Bill and Jenny, Arthur and Helen, and Vince and Michelle. Arthur is the principal keeper. Bill is quite experienced, and Vince is a newbie with a rather dubious past. Without sort of going into the story, obviously the whole thing is around their mysterious disappearance. So we know that from early on. It goes back in time, moves back and forth in time, both in terms of the live events and an inquiry, and also an author has decided to write a book about it. So he's interviewing the survivors. So we get their story mostly through them talking to him, but also there's a little bit of third-person narrative as well, which sometimes gets a bit confusing, I think. So let's start by just going round and asking the 3 of you to just give a quick summary of what you thought about the book, whether you enjoyed it, and what stood out for you. So shall we start with you, Terri?
Yes, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And for me, it was a very it was an easy read in that it flowed. I loved the imagery and the way that the author has managed the psychological traumas of all of the characters, but I think particularly Arthur. But for me, you know, the sea and the lighthouse almost were characters in themselves.
Good, lovely. Claire, what about you?
Yeah, I loved it too. I thought the writing was beautiful and it grabbed me and transported me straight away. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thought I loved the way that there was this, it was like peeling back the layers of the onion. So it was a good old psychological drama where just when you thought you knew a character and you knew what was going on, something else was revealed and something else was revealed. So it managed to be both sort of literary and page turny, which is a massive skill for an author to manage to do that. So yeah, I loved it.
Good, lovely. And Chris, how about you?
I didn't enjoy it so much, actually. I really enjoyed the lighthouse setting. I thought that was really interesting. Actually, maybe sort of do a bit of Googling and find out about lighthouse, sort of lighthouses and sort of going back to that era and, the job of the lighthouse keeper, and sort of, because in your head it's sort of, I think it's kind of covered in the book. It's kind of, you do kind of think of it being quite a romantic kind of role, but I thought the book really dealt with the fact that, actually it probably was quite a horrific role to, sort of take on. But I didn't enjoy it too much. I think that was because there was such a large cast of characters, and possibly because I listened to it on audio. I don't know how the rest of you read the book. I found it quite hard to get into. I found, because there were so many characters, I sort of found that quite sort of difficult to access, and I never really came to truly care about any of the characters that much. So I probably sound like I really hated the book. I didn't hate the book. I just didn't enjoy it to the same degree as I think it sounds like the rest of certainly Terri and Clare have enjoyed it. But yeah, I certainly enjoyed the setting. I just found it maybe a little slow for myself.
Yeah, I'm a bit sort of on Chris's side here. I thought it was a great book and well written, mostly some lovely writing, but I did find there wasn't enough differentiation in the characters, and I found myself getting confused, mixing Bill and Arthur up a bit. I thought Vince was the most clearly distinctive character, and I sort of also sort of found myself mixing the wives Jenny and Helen up a little bit. So I did sort of struggle a bit with it in that sense, but you know, I like the sort of murder mystery element in the way that the author was sort of dropping in little clues, like the whodunit aspect of it, like the poisoned chocolates, and the fact that Arthur had found this necklace that Bill had taken from his wife Helen. All these little sort of mystery things dropping in was sort of keeping you interested. But I got a bit confused with, I wasn't quite sure whether some things were just complete fantasy, like this mysterious white rook character, and this Sid who turned up at the lighthouse mysteriously to mend the generator. I never quite figured out who he was and whether he was real either. And this Eddie the White Rook, which kept being described as a silver person. So I sort of found it difficult to separate what was meant to be mystery and perhaps not really happening, perhaps just sort of an invention of one of the characters, particularly because Arthur seemed to be gradually cracking up as the story progressed. Yeah, I just sort of felt I was losing the plot a bit at points, and that's probably more about me than the author. But just talking about sort of some features of it, you know, Clare alluded to the fact that well, both Clare and Terri sort of found all the characters engaging and well drawn. But I just felt the way that we were sort of moving around the characters, going from one monologue to another, possibly did break up the continuity of the actual storytelling. You know, did you feel that, Terri, that there was a point where you were sort of losing the continuity because you were moving both backwards and forwards in time and dotting around all the characters all the time, and there wasn't a consistent narration going on?
No, I found quite the reverse, actually. And I think she managed all the intricate threads superbly, apart from the ending, which we'll come to later. But just to pick up on the points you were saying about those four characters merging, I'm wondering if the author did that on purpose, because in a sense, their four lives were merged in so many ways. But for me, that added to the intrigue of it, and also the mental state of them all, because there is this, you know, when one is recovering from shock and trauma, there is this almost meandering in the wilderness, isn't there? Which is perhaps what you were picking up on, Ian.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I hadn't really thought of that aspect of it being deliberate. I just felt it was sort of not enough differentiation. But yeah, they are all very much in the same boat, as it were, in terms of trauma, etc. How about you, Clare?
I did feel that they were very different characters, and I did see them all very differently. And I think, and I was wondering whether the fact that you get lots of different, as you said, you found it confusing that there were lots of different viewpoints, one after the other. But I wonder if that's sort of reflective of how the lighthouse shines a light around and it illuminates different things as it goes round. And perhaps that's what the story was doing, was using that sort of lighthouse imagery of illuminating this at this point in time, and then, you know, a few seconds on. And I wasn't, the segueing between the 1990s and the 1970s didn't bother me. I thought the 1970s was really well described for an author who wasn't around then, because she wasn't born until the 80s. And also, I mean, lighthouse keeping is different, but there was, for many years, my husband was in the army and I was an army wife, and at one point they compared being a lighthouse keeper's wife to being a bit like being a soldier's wife, and to me it really felt like that idea of being in married quarters and having your husband away and people assuming you're going to get on with the other wives, but actually you're very different. I think all of that really rang true for me. It all felt very well described, so I didn't have the same issues that you did. I thought it was really well done. Great.
And how about you, Chris? Was that obviously you perhaps had a slightly similar problem to me, and I think I can define it better by saying I felt the voice of those characters was too similar. I'm not saying their backgrounds or even their sort of ages. I just felt the voice I was reading wasn't differentiated enough. I think that's the best way I can describe it. Do you think that's maybe what you felt too?
Yeah, I did find those, particularly Bill and Arthur, to be quite very, very similar in the book, and I think that did become quite confusing. I think I certainly at times, because I was listening on audio, it became even more confusing because they attempted to do slightly different accents, I guess, or different voices for each character.
Yeah.
But particularly in the case of Arthur and Bill, there was no differentiation even when you were kind of listening to the voices, which did make it very confusing, which I think possibly is probably why my favourite character was actually Vince, because he was so different.
Yeah.
And I would have liked to see more of Vince in the book.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was well drawn, and I found his background interesting, and the fact that it became evident that he was really nothing like this character which everybody assumed he was, and obviously this was something that that Michelle knew, that she understood about him, that he was really nothing like this monster which appeared to be the case, and I thought he could have been developed a bit more. I felt there was scope for him to grow a little more in the story. Was there a point where you were pretty sure that Vince had done it? Were any of you kind of made your minds up that he got to be the culprit?
I think for myself, then he was a character that I felt I couldn't trust, even to the very end, really, but because there was so much intrigue, wasn't there? And the mixed with that, for me, that there was the general nautical superstition. All the tales of the sea and the single white bird, which I assume was an albatross, and so on and so forth. So no, I looked upon him, I'm afraid, as a baddie from beginning to end.
How about you, Claire?
I didn't think of Vince as a baddie, and I don't know, I didn't try to work it out. I just went with it. I never tried to figure out what would happen, because I thought maybe in the end it'll remain a mystery. I thought when I started it, I thought it might be a bit like, have you read Reservoir 13?
Yeah.
So you think it's going to be about someone's gone missing and they find out who did it, and they find a body and they find out who did it, but actually it's not about that at all. It's all about all the other characters and how it affects their lives. Yeah. And I thought when I started reading this, maybe this isn't going to be, we're never going to find out what happens, and it is just all about you know, so that's the butterfly wing effect and the impact it has on the wives and then down the generations from this seismic event that happened. And of course we did in the end find out what happened, which is quite satisfying, but I wasn't necessarily expecting that, so my brain wasn't working in that way. So no, I quite liked Vince. I quite liked Vince. Was, I think, I didn't necessarily think it was going to be him. No.
That's right. And it's an interesting comparison with Reservoir 13. It was shaping up to be. I did actually find myself thinking, I don't think we're ever going to find out what happens. Just like they never did in the true story of the three disappearing characters. So that's a really good point. How about you, Chris? Had you got him sort of signed up as the killer?
I don't think I did. No, I think I always sort of thought, for me, Vince was almost kind of being highlighted so early on as being kind of dodgy. You know, it was kind of, I guess he was the first character we sort of found out more about his character, or, you know, it was kind of highlighted. So I always kind of felt Bill or Arthur might be where, you know, whatever happened came from. But that could be because I enjoyed the character of Vince more, I think. And I think I did kind of, I found Vince to be, for me, was probably the most interesting character. I guess because of that similarity between Arthur and Bill, Vince stood out to me as kind of, I was like, oh, this is the interesting bit for me. I kind of I've got more interested when Vince came into it, and I would like to see more of him. But I mean, if you talk about the other two characters, I really found Bill quite an unpleasant character all the way through, but I quite liked Arthur. So, you know, as they talk about the differentiation, even though I'm saying they're very similar, I didn't like Bill, so there we go. As we ought to give a spoiler alert here, really, because we are going to have to say who did it. I don't think we can discuss this book without saying who did it. So just to warn anybody who might be watching the record. So, I mean, obviously they're not the only characters of the book. We've got the author. Did you feel that was a useful device, having an author who becomes almost just like a confessional type person, where people are confiding in him? Did you think that was quite a clever device, to have this whole thing revolving around an author who is actually not really looking to write a fictional account? Unlike the real author, this is somebody who wants to try and find out what happened. I sort of felt that was quite a clever device, but I'm not really sure if it was used that well, because too much of the writing was then monologues of the characters talking to him, and I would have. I think we could have benefited from a bit more third-person narration. Did anybody else feel that?
No, I felt it added. It gave it atmosphere, and Dan, the author, I think he created almost some stability and reality. So I found him very credible for the majority of the novel, because later on I found, the nearer we got to the end, it was rather contrived, so I was disappointed with that. But yes, and the monologues again created you know, a true to life image, almost a movie image of how the minds of these women were working, because there was so much happening, and they didn't even have each other to cling to, did they? Because they were experiencing their griefs totally separately. So the monologue, and that also for me created the monotony of the lighthouse work. You know, it's almost like painting by numbers. You do this at a certain hour, you sleep, and they're all confined in this cocoon, whether that be for good or bad.
Great. Okay. Yeah. How about you, Claire? Were you sort of get on well with almost continuous monologue story.
I quite liked it because I felt like it really helped me hop inside the heads of the female characters, and I like the fact that although it was about what happened to the men on the lighthouse, actually it was shining a light on the other side. And it's again this whole idea of shining a light on things, I think, was going on. It was shining a light into their interior lives. And I know you said you felt that you couldn't differentiate between the female characters, but I thought that these monologues really helped, and I thought you did hear the different voices. And I did wonder at one point, I did think, well, I wonder if Vince got off and ran off and became a writer, and if the author was Vince. And I started to think things like that, because I really wanted to know who the writer was. But I thought it was quite nice at the end that it turned out there was almost this, because I don't know how much you can say without being a spoiler, because there was this idea of a son who had been lost, and then there was the author was somebody's son at the end. I thought that was quite nice. I quite liked that.
I like that. Yeah. How about you, Chris? Were you sort of happy with the role of the author?
Yes and no. I quite enjoyed it, but I did find the monologues quite. I thought the author was a good way of getting out the information. I thought it was a real good way of bringing the information out. The monologue I did find quite, I don't say tiresome, because I think I got used to it actually. It annoyed me earlier on in the book, the kind of the monologues, and actually as I went through I got more and more used to it and didn't actually mind it. I think it was just kind of, in sometimes I think when I just go, oh, it's weird, it was almost a one-way conversation. I found that strange, and that, I wouldn't say annoyed me, but it just kind of, I found that hard to get over at the beginning. It's sort of like, what? The monologues, I thought once I got used to them were quite an effective way of dropping quite a lot of information in, I suppose, a relatively short space. Without, possibly if you'd have written it in a different way, would have been, I don't know, 10 pages, you probably would need 50, 60. So it was quite a good way of going, here's, like an information dump, I suppose. It was quite an effective way in doing that. And I know exactly what you mean. It annoyed me early on in the book.
Perhaps more so because it was an audio book.
Because it was like, oh, I'm listening to half a conversation. It was really strange going, oh, so it was a very strange way of listening to it. But I think once I got used to it, it was like, big information dump here. Now I'm going to find some more stuff out. This is quite, quite useful. So I had kind of a split feeling on it, really. I liked it, but I didn't like it. But I certainly got used to it. I certainly got used to it, which I think was actually, I think once I got used to it, I kind of appreciated it.
Yeah, good. Okay, so we're progressing with this whodunit then. So we're kind of, the authorities obviously wanted to decide it was Vince because it was nice and easy, and they could just wrap it all up and move on. And we were probably starting to get a bit suspicious that maybe it wasn't. So we then started to get a lot of arrows pointing at Arthur, because obviously Barry was having an affair with his wife Helen, and he'd found out. He sort of, towards the end of the book, I think he was having a bit of a breakdown, or it appeared that he was. And also the fact that the clocks had been stopped at the time that his son had died did indicate, possibly it was him, and that it was like he was just sort of, he'd done it because he'd just gone over the edge, really, in more ways than one. And did you find that convincing? Was there a point where you were sort of getting increasingly confident that it must have been Arthur? What do you think, Terri?
I suppose I went from one to another. So I didn't specifically think, right, I think he's done it. I mean, there's huge focus on his mental state of mind. So he would have been, you know, a classic one to put in the frame. But he was very, very troubled. I suppose at one point, because of his this horrendous grief journey that he was on, I had wondered whether he had, you know, taken his own life, and then the others had. I'm not quite sure what I thought about the others then, but no, I didn't have him in the frame from the beginning.
How about you, Claire?
I wonder if Emma Stonex, when she was writing it, if she knew who'd done it. You know, I wonder if she just kept on writing and just let the book tell her a bit, because they all had. It could have been any one of the three. So I wonder. It would be interesting to find out from her if she had known when she was writing, or if it arose in her own mind towards the end.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What about you, Chris?
I think I don't know who I really. I always kind of considered it to be one of either Bill or Arthur. I think I always considered it to be one of those two, because they were kind of the two central characters on the Lighthouse. I always felt they were kind of the two. They were kind of the heart of the story. That's what everything revolved around. You know, even you know their two wives were kind of the two key wives. So I always considered it to be something that came from those two. But I don't think I was ever convinced until extraordinarily towards the end, very, very towards the end.
Yeah, we'll come to the ending in a moment. Yeah,
who had actually done it? I don't think there's any point where, you know, I could say hand on heart, I was convinced from halfway through it was that person. You know, I mean, I could have said, you know, it would have been a pure guess. There was nothing to really back it up with. So I think in that way it was quite good in that it, you know, it did keep a mystery going through the whole book.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a stage at which you could say, oh, it was easy peasy. You know, I think it did keep that mystery going, which was good, and I was glad that it was actually solved, because that we were talking about it earlier. Because I maybe hadn't quite enjoyed the book so much, I'd been really annoyed if there hadn't been a solution to it. So I was glad there was a solution. So
let me just read something that Bill says on page 59. He's talking about him going back home when he's relieved. And he says, only I don't go back. I don't know where I go or how this happens, but that's the good part. Not knowing just happens. And I remembered that bit, and I was thinking, what the hell does he mean? You know, so is she dropping in a clue? Is it a spoiler? What, you know, why say that on page 59 of the book? That's just a comment. I'm not expecting you to explain it. So Bill did it. What did you think to that as a denouement? Was it? I mean, it was a curious thing to do, but you know, how did it strike you, that ending, Terri?
I felt the ending let the book down. Because all the way through, I felt that Emma had created this almost a cocoon of empathy and respect for the keepers who did disappear in the 1900s. And then towards the end, it almost became, for me, a little fairy tale-ish. And I don't know, it lost a little of its charm there. But that, you know, it didn't detract from the rest of the book, which I felt was quite outstanding.
Claire, was the ending satisfying for you?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it was like the book that we read last month, where the ending was quite satisfying and yet somehow not in keeping with the rest of the book, which is what Terri said. So it was nice to know, obviously all the way intellectually, you there's something saying, well, I wonder what actually happened. I wonder who done it. But the rest of the book was more than just a whodunit. So I don't know how she could have done it differently, but I know what Terri means. There was something not, you know, as if she was thinking, right, okay, we need to wind it up now, and the readers will want to know what actually happened, and almost as if it was, you know, being written for Netflix or something. We need a kind of a solid ending. Yeah, and I don't know how she could have done it differently, but I agree with Terri. There was something. It was satisfying and yet dissatisfying at the same time.
Yeah, and Chris.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not sure there could have been a satisfying ending because of the setup. You know, 3 people on a lighthouse and they all go missing. I'm not sure how you could have come up with a kind of satisfying, I don't know, even plausible ending. I guess. So yeah, it was a little. It wasn't a brilliant ending, but I don't know what else she could have done. I don't know how else she could end that setup. I don't think there's ever going to be I don't think there's a plausible ending to that, really. You know, a satisfying ending to that. So, but as I said, I'm glad there was an ending. I'm glad it didn't end on kind of you know, I've gone through however many pages and it was kind of you decide. So I'm glad there was an ending. I'm glad it did bring an ending to it. But I think I agree. It didn't necessarily satisfy.
Yeah, I mean, I found it plausible to the extent that obviously Bill was hoping to survive and then be able to run off with Helen, but he could have run off with Helen anyway without murdering 2 people. So I did find it a little bit unsatisfactory, but like the rest of you, I didn't really detract from the read as a whole. And you know, I wouldn't sort of condemn it just for that perhaps slight element of weakness at the end. So we're nearly coming to the end. So it's time to just go around and ask if you can give it a score out of 5 and whether you would recommend it to a friend. So Terri, would you like to go first?
I would give it 4.5 purely because of the ending. So if it had been, for me, a better ending, it would have been 5. And yes, I would recommend it.
Yeah, I agree with Terri. I would have, I'd give it a 4.5, and I would definitely, I already have recommended it to other people. So yeah.
Good. Chris?
3, I think. And I don't think I would recommend it to a friend, but I wouldn't actively not recommend it to someone. So yeah.
You wouldn't turn people off it.
No,
yeah.
People off.
Yeah, I would recommend it to people. I'd probably give it a 4. But yeah, I think it's. I'd probably, because I struggle a bit with the characters, I'd probably recommend it with a warning to just sort of make a bit of an effort to write down who's married to who and stuff like that, so you don't get mixed up like I rather tended to. So that's it for today. Just time to say that the April book will be The Summer Water by Sarah Moss, and I think Chris will have that available when it comes available next week sometime.
Yeah, 1st of April.
Yeah, lovely. Okay. And so thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.